views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronxtalk. We spend so much time and energy on keeping our show current and to the cutting edge of what's happening today in the Bronx that sometimes we miss the bigger, if not the biggest pictures. And that is in this borough that officially turned 100 last year. We have not only a wonderful rich history and legacy, but also have incredible places that are steeped in our history and our traditions that we can visit and enjoy. And so right on time with the coming of summer, when we all have a little more time to enjoy what's around us, we thought we would do two things. Next week, we're going to talk about the movement to create more historical districts in the Bronx. And tonight, we bring back one of our favorite guests, the Bronx Borough historian and his co-author, to talk about this book, The Bronx, The Ultimate Guide to New York City's Beautiful Borough, as well as other subjects of history and legacy in the borough of the Bronx. Now, if you have questions about the borough or its history, or about the history of your neighborhood, maybe regarding a landmark you want to know more about, or the origin or the name of your Bronx street or neighborhood, then this is the time to get a direct and concrete answer to that question. No one is better at it than tonight's guests. The borough historian is here. Please call in at 718-960-7261, or you can send the comments or questions in an email to bronxtalk@bronxnet.org, or post them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. For the here and now, Bronx Borough historian Professor Lloyd Alton, thank you for joining us again.
It's my pleasure.
And his co-author, the co-author of this book, it is Shelley Olson. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting us.
Professor Alton, so nice to have you again. Yeah. So nice to see you again. You know, you have written 1,000 articles about the Bronx, 10 incredible books about the Bronx. This book, which is absolutely wonderful and a delight to read and go through and have, if I asked you about, I don't know, the Bartopel Mansion, you could have told me this without this book. You could have told me about all these wonderful places to go, Polk Cottage, Woodlawn Cemetery, any of these places. We've talked about them for years.
Sure.
You could do it in your sleep. Why did you come out and put a book together that is really a tour guide or a guide to this borough with things that I'm sure you know all about?
Well, first of all, it was in the back of my mind for many, many years that the Bronx really didn't have a guidebook. If you pick up a guidebook to New York City, it really doesn't say anything about the Bronx, or very little. And I was always annoyed by that, but I never had the time in which to do that. At one point, I was on a bus going to the Bronx County Historical Society to do some research.
Which is in the Van Cortlandt variant house.
The Valentine variant house.
Valentine variant.
Yeah, and I'm sitting down, and suddenly this woman comes to me, and she leans down, looks at my face, and says, "Are you Lloyd Alton?" And I said, "I plead guilty." And immediately she whips out her cell phone and starts calling her husband and says, "I found him. He's right here on the bus with me."
Coincidentally on a bus?
Right.
And that was the young lady.
And that's Shelley Olson. And basically, the rest, as they say, is history, because now we have to take a look at her point of view, because without her, this book would never happen.
You know, I did all my pre-work, I did all my pre-interviewing, and this was an aspect of this that never came out. So, Shelley, you, and I'm going to summarize what you had told me, you're from elsewhere, and you were looking for, you love to travel, and one place you fell in love was was New York City. So how did it come that you were actually looking for the man who you ran into on a bus? Do we know what number bus? That's a moment in history.
Yeah, BX10.
On the BX10. How did it come to pass that you found your way to the Bronx and then were seeking out the man that you ran into?
Since my early 20s, Gary, I really have had a great dream to have a residence here in New York City. But it's a big problem to find something affordable. I love the arts.
You're preaching the language of the Bronx, I can tell you that.
So I started out actually at Lincoln Center, and that was the first place I looked to live, and that wasn't going to happen. It was 7 years ago.
You did mention that you're a fan of music, so we wanted
Yes, I'm a composer, and I was going to the opera quite a lot and composing music. And so I just kept traveling up the number 1 bus, and I discovered it was
train.
Rather the number 1 train, exactly. The MTA, number 1 train. And until I finally arrived in the area around Van Cortlandt Park, and I discovered it was a beautiful place. And then I started looking in the Bronx in that area to see if I could find a residence. And the first place I really visited was beautiful Wave Hill, and I fell in love. So then I wanted to start reading about the Bronx, and that led me to Lloyd's books, which I devoured with great interest. And the more that I read them, the more I wanted actually to meet the man.
To meet the man, and then you literally ran into him on the bus? That is, boy, is that ever a Bronx story. That's incredible. And actually, we were just discussing this beforehand, that the history of the Bronx actually developed around the subways, right?
That's
As
correct.
the subways developed. So just briefly about that, just because it came up. So this the gestation of this volume, which we're going to get into, happened around the subways.
Well, what happened was that in the early part of the 20th century, parts of Manhattan, like the Lower East Side, were overcrowded. They had a greater density of population than Calcutta. And the idea was to try to disperse the population evenly around the other boroughs of the city. And the city then started building subways, and a lot of them into the Bronx. And, of course, those overcrowded areas of Manhattan went to the wide open spaces of the Bronx.
Right.
Developers built apartment houses to house them, and that is basically how the Bronx developed.
And what's fascinating to me is that Shelley really did the same path.
Same thing, right.
She wanted to be in Manhattan. She knew she wanted to be, so she traveled up the line. Anyway, that's really an aside from where we're going with this. So the book contains 3 separate sections, which are attractions, walking tours, places to go, things to see. Again, you could obviously, we could talk about the Valentine Variant House or any of the places in the Bronx, and you could do it off the top of your head. How did you get to a point where this was created so that you could simplify it? And what role did Shelley play in that process of getting you to be able to simplify it so we could have a book that everybody could enjoy?
Well, first of all, it was Shelley began to push the idea that that we needed a guidebook to the Bronx.
Because she was an outsider.
She was an outsider. She said she went to her neighbors to find out what was in the Bronx. They didn't know, and she couldn't find it in the guidebooks either. And as I said, I had this idea in the back of my head anyway. At that point, I was busy finishing another book, and I said, if we hold it, and then until we finish that other book, and then we'll work on this one. And basically, it was a true collaboration. Shelley loves the natural, the outdoors, and the things like that, and so the parts about Van Cortlandt Park, Pelham Bay Park, Wave Hill, the Botanical Garden, Shelley took the lead. When it came to some of the historic sites, I took the lead. And I said to myself, well, listen, if I travel to places in Europe or in other parts of the United States or elsewhere, and I have a guidebook, what do I want the guidebook to say? I certainly don't want it in great detail, but I don't.
You've written enough of those books,
right?
Of course.
But I wanted in enough detail so that I would know what I am looking at.
Was that difficult for you? Don't worry, Shelley, we're going to get to you. Was that difficult for you to simplify things that you know so much about?
Well, in some senses, yes. In other senses, no. I had to say to myself, what is the most important things about this that I have to say? And of course, since it was a true collaboration between Shelley and myself, she critiqued mine, and I critiqued hers, and together we got to the happy medium.
Did you do the writing together, or
Yes.
did it? So in other words, you did a piece, and then she would edit, and
Right, and
vice versa.
then sometimes, we on a particular chapter we would, she would be some pieces, I would be other pieces, but basically the editing was all ours together.
Shelley, in choosing what is in the book, whether it be Wave Hill, City Island, Belmont, the Grand Concourse, Mott Haven, I mean, all these areas. Did you, for him, it was something he knows all about. Did you go visit them and say, hey, let's do this? Or did you, how did you have input into what should be in there? And talk to me a little bit about the discovery of things that you found along the way.
I began by discovering the natural areas, and I was taking photographs from the start. And as I continued with the natural areas, I looked into the history of some of the natural areas. For example, I was amazed to discover that in Van Cortlandt Park, George Washington and his troops had stayed there. And that, of course, I learned from Lloyd's books.
I was about to say, so then you could do that and then, of course, turn to the historian and get the real facts and even some detail that would be interesting.
That's correct. So some of the natural areas I just naturally gravitated to, but I would not have known the rich history, for example, of Mott Haven without Lloyd. There's no way in the world. So after Lloyd made those suggestions, actually when we began the book, we sat down and discussed on several occasions what should be in the book. That was one of the major decisions that we had to make.
Did you do a lot of listening in that case because of his experience, or did you say, you know what, Lloyd, ease up?
I did an enormous amount of listening. But not only that, it actually worked very well as a collaboration. I think that I came in really with fresh eyes and not knowing so much in the beginning, but terribly interested. Because when Lloyd could tell me with great detail and great depth, so much about the borough, which was fascinating, I could also come back and say, we have to remember that the people reading this book may not even know what a borough is.
So what's really refreshing, and I have to say it does come through, is that it has obviously the historical veracity, but it has an outsider's view and say, well, wait a minute, this was really lovely to discover.
It was a marvelous discovery for me because I'm the photographer also for the book. So I made many trips.
We're going to show the pictures, by the way. Go ahead.
In 4 seasons, I would go to these places to try to make, spring, summer, fall, and winter. And of course, it had to be with the correct sun angle for the side of the street, etc. So I ended up doing a lot of travel over the Bronx during that 1 year. The 36 or so photos in that book are just a modicum of the many hundreds that I have in my own library.
One of the things I do want to talk about, and that is right here. I don't know if you can. You don't have to get close, folks, but it says walking tours, and so I'm curious. And again, Professor Alton has led tours, bus tours, walking tours, parks tours, university tours. He's done them all. Did you both walk the tours? Did you walk the tours, or did you basically kind of just script them?
Whenever Lloyd had a walking tour, I was there. From the,
How long has this project been under play?
Well, I began writing the book almost 1 year actually before the collaboration began because I'd done a lot of work to try to find the places. I was reading Lloyd's books. I was trying to go to the places, but it was extremely difficult without the directions and without, even if I could find the directions on somehow to know exactly where. If I just would have had the book. So finally my friend said, well, you're beginning to know more than we know. Why don't you write the book? And I laughed for the first year, and then I started writing. And after 1 year, I thought, well, I might be able to write a good book, but I'll never be, if I'm lucky, but I'll never be able to write a great book without Lloyd Alton, who was really the authority. Because I was really restating so much of what Lloyd said, I preferred really him with the collaboration. And that was my dream, and I got my dream.
So you said you were working on it for a year, and then how many years did you work together to finish the book?
It was 1 year.
1 year.
1 year.
1 year, wow.
1 year. We collaborated every Friday
pretty
afternoon.
good. Yeah.
Just about. We came together.
So for the first time, Lloyd Altan finished a book in a year. That's pretty good, right? What I really want to do, and there are so many interesting things, and so the walking tours. So you did the walking tours. That was the answer to my question. That was the
Yes.
question.
Yes.
So you did them all.
Yes. I've done all of the walking tours, and they're all great.
The other thing I want to show folks is the photographs, and we're going to show you a couple of individual photographs, and we'll use that as a way to talk about some of the things that are in the book. But I noticed right away, Shelley, the photographs are, and I've seen all of these places, but never seen them like this. The photographs are clean and clear and beautiful. It's worth having the book just to look at the photographs. And you both can look over there. So this, Professor Altan, is obviously the Bronx Zoo.
That's correct.
Many people know the beautiful, wonderful, incredible animals, but they're not aware that of the history of this building. Talk about this building.
Well, this building was originally built as the Elephant House, and it has a lot of sculpture on it, heads of elephants and things like that. It's now used as a visitor center because they consider the space too confined for elephants. But it's built like a Renaissance palace.
It's just an absolutely
Right.
incredible
Right.
structure. So,
Right.
and my reason for taking the time, not only can you see these are gorgeous photographs, but I want people to really appreciate our borough. And then this summer, I had a friend who was looking at a New York City things to do in New York City that were for free, and I said, "Here's the book for you because this is." Now, this is one of the joys.
Oh.
This is one of the most unique places in the world.
Right. Yeah. This is in the Bronx Zoo. This is the Congo gorilla forest, and I entitled this this particular photograph "Face to Face in the Congo gorilla forest."
Shelley, you were a visitor and saw this for the first time. Couldn't believe it, right?
Yes, I was. This was the first time that I was in the Congo gorilla forest. There was a mother and child. I started taking lots of photos. The mother asked the little girl to please go away so I could take, just the gorilla. I said, "Oh, no, please let her stay." And in fact, this is one of a series. They just had the instant report, and I think that gorilla may be saying, "I love you," in sign language to the little girl.
Well, what else? Of course, you can go to Tiger Mountain and see something similar.
Sure.
All right, what else we got here? They're just going to roll. Now, this, Professor Altan, little background. And I can tell you, let me just say, as a Bronxite who served jury duty and everything else, how many times have you walked by this and never even took a look at it?
Yeah, these when the Bronx County building was built and opened up in 1934, it is completely encrusted with statuary. At the entrance of each one of the four sides, there are flanking the staircase. There are these high relief blocks. That was done by a consortium of four sculptors under the leadership of Adolf Weinman, who was a major American sculptor at the time. And each one is allegorical. It is supposed to illustrate in some way, shape, or form the inscription that is just above the entrance, that is carved just above the entrance of the entablature. Now, also here you find on the building itself a bas-relief, and that also illustrates about what good government can do. And the sculptor there is George Keck, who was another great American sculptor. And I like to say, of course, that means that the Bronx has attracted some of the major chiselers in the history of the country.
I was going to make a comment about good government, but I decided not to go there. I will mention, let's go to the next photo, but I will mention that all of these are, you can see the photos in the book, although I don't know if this one is actually in the book.
No, this one's not in the book.
But, if you take the book with you and for teachers, take a class. You got spring now, you got June, you're trying to find something to do. Pick up the book, take the book, and bring the kids. Now, what is this, Professor?
Yeah, this is inside the county building in what is called Veterans Memorial Hall. There are four murals that depict scenes in the history of the Bronx, and this is they were done by a fellow by the name of James Monroe Hewlett, who was a major American muralist at the time, and after his work here was done, he became the head of the American Academy in Rome. This shows the arrival of Jonas Bronk, the first European settler to the Bronx, and you see people are putting together his home. and beginning to settle.
All right, I want to move it ahead.
Sure.
The next two photographs, let's go to the next one. And maybe we'll ask Shelley to just comment. When you walked there for the first time, I mean, I remember growing up and taking a walk there, but when you walked there for the first time, what were your thoughts? This is the Hall of Fame of Great Americans.
The Hall of Fame for Great Americans. The striking thing about the art of the Bronx is that it's so interrelated with nature. Where would you see 100 of the most striking sculptural busts set with birdsong around them, and trees, and four seasons, and free of charge whenever you want to go, and historical reminders of some of the most wonderful people who gave us the legacy of who we are, and really all of the Bronx is 6 miles by 7. I discovered it was actually walking distance from my home.
This, to me, in part, in the way you just expressed it, is one of the great values of the book, and the great values of having, in a way, I hate to put it this way, an outsider taking a look, because those of us who've seen it would maybe never have thought about the integration of the Hall of Fame of Great Americans and art. And I will always remember that my friend, Professor Lloyd Alton, told me that this was mentioned in The Wizard of Oz, and they said, you will be a bust, you will be a bust, you will be a bust in the Hall of Fame. That was what the Munchkin said. The next one is one of the beautiful sculptures, and just to show the detail, if you've never been there, what a great place to go. And again, please, teachers, take your kids.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that the sculptures themselves are done by some of the major American sculptors in their individual day. This bust of Abraham Lincoln was originally done by Auguste St. Gaudens, who himself is in the Hall of Fame for being a major American sculptor.
We haven't had an entry in there in how many years?
Oh dear. Well, it was, I believe, in the 1990s when Franklin Roosevelt was the last bus that was actually installed.
The first Hall of Fame anywhere was in the borough of the Bronx.
That's right. This is the very, very first Hall of Fame, opened up in 1900, and all of the other Halls of Fame that exist, start with that one.
They're telling me that we have Joseph on the line. So, Joseph, questions? Anything to say? We've got a couple more photos that I want to show. Hi, Joseph.
How are you?
We're doing well.
Listen, it's just to give some credit where credit was due.
Okay.
Naturally, Trump, thank God, he was able to come across and create this beautiful golf course.
Okay.
But it goes way back. It goes back to, I was a police officer in a 45th precinct, and my best friend was once Councilman Michael DeMarco.
Okay.
Who since passed on.
I can't imagine where you're going with this. Go ahead, get to it. What is the point?
But had it not been for Mike, he was head of the finance committee, and he was able to get the money to
build the golf course.
To start this golf course.
Okay.
It was a city dub.
There you go. You know what we're going to do, Joseph? In just a few minutes, we're going to show you a picture of the first public golf course. And actually, I chose that photo to show because we are getting a new golf course in the Bronx. Anything else you wanted to mention, Joseph? But thank you for the phone call.
Well, if you want to verify it, you could get in touch with Councilman Baca.
Okay, we could do that.
Community relations.
Or I will just ask Professor Alten. Thank you very much. Let's move it ahead because we're running out of time. So take about 15 seconds on each one of these. This is Edgar Allan Poe's house.
That's right. This is inside the Poe cottage. The rocking chair was actually owned by Edgar Allan Poe. We couldn't find all of the furniture that existed at the time, but there's a description of it, of what his interior looked like, and so all of these pieces fit the description.
And as he rocked back and forth, it whispered, "Nevermore,
nevermore, nevermore."
Let's go to the next one. This also to show that we have other great writers. This is Herman Melville, right?
That's right. This is Herman Melville's grave in Van Cortlandt, in Woodlawn Cemetery, and of course he is best known for writing Moby Dick, but he wrote many other novels in his day, and he's a major American writer. And he joins many other people who are giants in American history and American arts in Woodlawn Cemetery.
This structure is well familiar to people in the borough of the Bronx. How long has it been standing? It was the original armory, right?
Originally built as an armory. It was built just before World War I broke out.
Wow.
And it is going to be converted into the Kingsbridge National Ice Center, which will have 9 ice rinks in there. That will help train people in hockey, figure skating, speed skating, and all of that stuff. And it'll be open to the public as well. And here it is, the Van Cortlandt Golf Course.
Which, in contrast to what Joseph said, I just wanted to mention, this is the first public golf course.
It's the very first public golf course in the United States.
That's right.
And all of the other public golf courses, all the other cities, took a look at whether this was going to work out or not before they built their own.
And the last picture I saved, because this is, in a way, home to Professor Alton. You mentioned it earlier. It is the Valentine Varian House.
Yeah.
Professor Alton, what is in that house?
It is now the Museum of Bronx History. It's the second oldest house in the Bronx. It was built in 1758 and is operated by the Bronx County Historical Society as the Museum of Bronx History. It has permanent and changing exhibits. So if you want to know something about the history of the Bronx, see what it looked like in the past, this is the place to go. You can go several times, and the exhibits may be changing.
There you go. Shelley, when you think about this a wonderful book that you folks have written, who do you have in mind that, I mean, I mentioned school teachers and parents that use it and take your kids and learn about your home, let the kids be proud of it. But you tell me, who in your mind did you write this for? People like yourself from the outside?
There are more than 1 million visitors to New York City every single week. And I had in mind the 1 million people who come here who have not had the opportunity to see 1/5 of this wonderful city. And I love the Bronx.
There you go. See, a transplanted New Yorker, I go, or somebody who's transplanted too here.
Yeah.
Professor Alton, go ahead. We've got to be real quick. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think that also there are a lot of people in the Bronx who don't know about the Bronx, and there are a lot of people in New York City, especially in Manhattan, who have never traveled north to the Bronx, and I think this is good for them too.
We have barely scratched the surface
That's correct.
of all that's in here. It is just a delight. You wanted to add something, and I cut you off. Did you have something else you wanted to mention?
Well, only last year, Professor Alton was given the key to the Bronx, and I hope, that this will give the key back to the world.
To the people of the city.
The city, to see the Bronx.
Pick it up, folks. It comes out June 3rd.
Actually, believe it
Or
or
it's
not,
already
it was already in bookstores.
Got it.
They can get it online too.
Folks, we did have a viewer comment from last week's show. We did a show with the Speaker of the City Council, and we wanted to put that up. We were talking about the decriminalization or potential decriminalization of low-level crimes. Efren G. wrote on Facebook, criminals will commit more crimes and get the city to pay their tab. SMH in the current vernacular is shake my head. Thank you to Efren. And if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org or put them on our Facebook page, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Make sure you like Bronx Talk on Facebook, and you can check out our archives at bronxnet.org. You'll find Bronx Talk on the lower right navigation bar. As we mentioned earlier, next week, the second part of our little mini-series on Bronx history with a show about the effort to create more historical districts in the borough of the Bronx. Then the week after, we help celebrate Gay Pride Week with a show on the Bronx vibrant LGBT community. Lots going on. We see you every Monday night for Bronx Talk. Thank you to Dahlia, to Shirley, to Helen, Bianca, and everybody here, and we'll see you next week.